Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph Demetrius, one of the astrologers. This is part of our musician series, and this artist is Joni Mitchell. Scorpio, Cancer rising, Pisces moon. Before I get going though, let me remind you that we do these portraits every Tuesday, and we do our forecast for the coming week every Friday. You can find those at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. Please subscribe and push the little button so you get reminded whenever the forecasts come up. Born November 7th, 1943. She fits in perfectly in our musician series because she's had a tremendously long career. Her birth time is listed as 10 p.m. MWT in Fort Macleod, Canada. She's born, like I said, in Scorpio, and she has Cancer rising. So that means that she's got a lot of water going on. Then, on top of that, highly elevated is her moon in Pisces. All three of these are in feminine water signs. These are the three feminine water signs. The rising is 19 degrees, the sun is 14 degrees, the moon is at 24 degrees. Okay, so they're not exactly trine, but it's a big water trine. This is a person with very deep emotions, very, very deep emotions. And whenever you're dealing with a lot of water, you're oftentimes dealing with a lot of creativity. She's a very well-known songwriter. In fact, she's probably a more well-known songwriter than she was, simply for her singing. Her music has been covered an amazing number of times. The sun is in the fifth house. It's the house of creativity. Okay, so she is someone who just very naturally comes from the heart. Scorpio is a sign that's very committed. It's very driven. It's deep, it's watery. And she has Mercury conjunct the sun within 1 degree. So the idea of going into words, going into writing, Mercury is writing in words, it's just very natural for her. In some ways, this is a very kind of classic chart, especially of musicians of an earlier era. Musicians and the younger musicians today, the charts are very different. A lot more of their life is lived out in the open. This is someone who has a great number of the planets below the horizon. Okay, you have the Ascendant, and then you have Jupiter, Venus, Neptune, Mercury, and the Sun all below the horizon. This is a deep personal life. Most of her life is lived with her intimates, with family, with friends, with lovers. And then you have, above the horizon, the moon highly elevated. And this is a very, very strong moon because when the sun is below the horizon, the moon is always stronger. And when the moon is above the horizon in a nighttime chart, it stands out. In some ways, is more powerful than the sun. So that moon in Pisces, the sign of the dreamer, the sign of the poet, the sign of the lover, of the romantic, is up in the 9th house, a Jupiterian house in a sign of Jupiter, Pisces, the traditional feminine ruler of Jupiter, and the moon is in Jupiter's house. Conjunct within 2 degrees of the midheaven, the flag above her castle that says, "This is my career," a feminine poet. Right? That's her flag right there. You can spot it. And that's really where her life is lived through. Now, the ascendant at Cancer, that's interesting. That's the same ascendant as Adele. So there's a certain kind of protective shell that they put around themselves. But when you get past there, they're very nice. But she doesn't really have anything else in Cancer except for Ceres, the largest of the asteroids, and what I call the gypsy queen, or the queen of the nomads, because it's the largest of the asteroids. And it looks like a planet. When you see it, it's perfectly round like a planet. And it has a lot to do with women's ability to herd their group. In fact, the whole concept of the asteroids reflects very strongly the idea of women's ability to network and to work in cooperation in ways that are often behind the scenes. She has the ability to nurture the people around her and herd them in certain ways. And she's always been part of a community of musicians. She's lived in, I don't know if she still is, but she lived in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles for many, many years and was very much part of her community. She has in the 12th house, which is the house of the studio. Okay, it's like that protected space that you get into. In the 12th house, she has Uranus and Gemini. Gemini, the sign of the writer. Uranus has a lot to do with mass media. It has a lot to do with the ability to come up with original ideas. Vesta, right, which is our ability to believe in something, and Vesta conjunct Mars, all in Gemini, and Mars conjunct Saturn. So the 12th house, the house of the studio, is packed. She probably did more significant work in studios than she ever did on stages. Right? Cancer rising isn't that comfortable on stage, but they do like the studio, and her studio work is very significant. If you actually go online and look for her music, a lot of her most famous pieces were done in the studio with other artists. So that Mars conjunct Vesta, that's a really interesting combination. Mars is physical energy, right? Vesta is the flame. People who have Mars conjunct Vesta tend to have super energy. They have a lot of energy. It really supercharges that. And it's in the sign of Gemini, writing, communications, the arts, ideas, conversation. This is where it really comes out. In the studio, she's just very, very creative. Her ability to weave songs together, and that's been her talent, as a songwriter. And then Saturn's there, so she's ambitious about it. She's ambitious and she works hard. She can spend a lot of time in the studio. And the Uranus there, which means she can add sizzle to it. And this is all up in what's called the Gogolon spot above the horizon. Now, it's interesting. She has what's called a quintile between the Uranus and her moon. And quintile is the degree of the goddess, 72 degrees, and it's the sign of high creativity. Uranus is a very modern planet, discovered in the mid-1700s, right? So it's about the modern world. And of course, I've been a big fan of Joni Mitchell for many, many years. I've never heard her in person, but I've heard tons of her recordings. That's a Uranian quality. That's very much a Uranian quality. She also has a quintile that runs between her Mars and her Pallas Athena, the warrior goddess. Pallas Athena in Aries, it's her creativity. So you really see this very strong creativity all around, this core of feminine energy. Interestingly, she has her Jupiter in the second house, which is, in Leo, which is very good for money. The second house is money, and Jupiter makes things bigger, and Leo tends to be a leader. She's probably had some challenges with money someplace along the way because of that, because Pluto's there as well. She has Venus in Virgo in the third house, which is interesting. Venus in Virgo, it's in Mercury's house with Chiron. Chiron at 13 degrees Virgo in the third house, in the house of early childhood, and she suffered from polio as a child. And she has a certain amount of debility that comes with that she's, managed to overcome, and is not obvious when she's performing. But that Venus and Chiron there in the third house, it gives her a certain humility that comes with that. But also the Venus in Virgo, you oftentimes see in artists, you see it in a lot of actors. I think it has to do with, it's the arts, but it has to do with the willingness to be an instrument, to put our own passions aside and look at it in a way that says, well, I understand all these emotions, but I'm going to use it for my work. Virgo's the working sign after all, and I'm going to use it for my work, and I'm going to put it together in a dispassionate way. And also, that saying, genius is in the details. Well, in the arts, Venus in Virgo shows a certain talent for dealing with artistic details. I mean, for most people, artistic details are not that important. It doesn't get the cows fed, right? For artists, the details are everything, right? It's geniuses in the details. So that willingness to take, a great deal of attention in the details of my art, especially in the third house, my writing, that's something that she exhibits. So it's a very interesting chart. And when you look at her chart, you really have to look at that moon in Pisces at the midheaven. Once you recognize that, and you look at that and the quintile to the Uranus, and then the quintile between that Mars and that Pallas Athena, it really tells you all that big trine in water, and then that powerful moon. That powerful moon about, this is really one of the great women poets of the boomer generation. So, and she recently has come back to all kinds of attention, right? Especially when what happened? Jupiter entered Pisces. and is passing right over, heading right for her midheaven and her moon. Ta-da. So that's Joni Mitchell, born November 7th, once again, 1943, 10 p.m., MWT, Fort Macleod, Canada. A very talented artist. And please come and see us at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. We do these portraits every Tuesday. We do our forecast on the coming Fridays for the coming week. You can also go to planetarycalendar.com where you can find the calendars and our books on astrology and feng shui and other interesting topics. Until next time, be well.